Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, inspiring readers, writers and nature lovers to embrace creativity and nature connection for positive well-being. I'm your host, Anna Williscroft. Join me for heartfelt conversations about transformational journeys and practical tips with fellow writers, journaling guides and outdoor enthusiasts. Discover how writing, reading and nature connection can help you find clarity, spark creativity and live a more fulfilling life. Whether you're a seasoned writer, a curious beginner, or simply someone seeking a deeper connection to life, this podcast is for you. It's wonderful to have you here today. In this episode of the Writing with Purpose podcast, I'm joined by Kate Busby, a trauma-informed somatic practitioner who specialises in forest bathing and aromatherapy. Kate shares the fascinating science behind forests literally heal our bodies through phytoncides and negative ions, and how she combines slow walking in nature with journaling circles. From creating the Honest Journal to leading transformative forest experiences in Barcelona, this conversation reveals how nature and writing become powerful tools for processing trauma and finding inner peace. Hi, Kate Busby, trauma-informed somatic practitioner specialising in forest bathing and aromatherapy with a focus on addressing the physiological impacts of trauma. Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna, for having me.
You're more than welcome. I'm very excited to get stuck in to our conversation. So, Kate, you are a certified yoga facilitator, a certified sylvotherapist, if I've said that right, which is forest therapy, incorporating sound healing, yoga, nidru into your holistic approach to healing. You live in Spain. You're from England originally. Your parents are from different countries. We'll delve into that a little bit later because I think that's quite fascinating to learn about, your roots and where you've come from and how you come to be where you are. You work as a partner of the recognised Barcelona Wellness Centre, Frizan. Did I say that right as well? All these new words to me this morning. You're involved in the Barcelona Journaling Festival. You lead forest bathing experiences through your Do Nada Club. And you're a powerhouse in the corporate marketing world. So, Kate, how do you find the time? You seem so busy.
I also have 2 kids. It's probably worth mentioning as well. So I get pulled in a fair few directions, I think it's fair to say. But no, I've always thrived on a very diverse life. I have so many different pursuits. So I'm just very lucky to have a family and a partner who are understanding of that and who help and enable that, actually. Sometimes I bet they wish they didn't enable so much of it, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah. And if you're anything like me, and it sounds as though we're very similar, that we always have to have a new challenge. We thrive on having that challenge, and the busyness of life doesn't always appear to be busy when we're like that.
I agree completely. Yeah, and I think that certain pursuits are more of an adrenaline shot and kind of lead you in one direction. And other pursuits are more of a calm down, a kind of, getting back into yourself. And I think both are really important. I don't advocate one or the other. I think it just depends on what you need and, learning how you are as a person and what allows you to regulate yourself. I think these are really important life skills that we don't get taught in the classroom, but we learn perhaps later in life through various different practices and pursuits. So yeah, I think it's good to have like a varied life, and I think most of us do, whether we recognize it or not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you touched on a quite significant point there. We're not taught about this sort of thing at school, but how valuable would that be if we learnt these things at school, and the importance of slowing down and how to recognize when we are perhaps going a little bit too fast and we need to draw back a little bit, which is lovely how you sort of combine getting outdoors with the forest therapy side of things and the sound healing as well, which is just absolutely fantastic for slowing down and getting in tune with what your body needs. I've experienced that a couple of times and I'm a big advocate of it. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, again, these practices have allowed me to understand the human body better, the human mind. We are 70 to 75% water. And the sound healing is just one of the things you picked up on there. I was a skeptic initially. How can playing Tibetan and crystal quartz bowls in any way, shape or form help you or, make you feel better? But given that we are majority water and sound passes through water as vibration, how can we not be in some way impacted by the sounds around us, whether it's sounds of the natural world, traffic passing on the street, or in a contained environment, listening to these exquisite vibrations coming from metal copper bowls or crystal bowls. You go into a session of a sound therapy session, typically at a very low vibrational state, stress, fear, anxiety, what I've got to do next after this session, these kinds of thoughts and these kinds of feelings really put you in this very low vibrational state. And when you leave a sound therapy session, these bowls have basically vibrated through your being, through the water of your being, and uplifted the vibrational frequency of your body. And so it's no great surprise that you often leave these sessions feeling spaced out, expansive, calm, almost like you're floating. And that's not just your mind playing tricks on you. I mean, that is the transition from a low vibrational state when you walked in to a much higher one when you walk out. Sure, you could get back into your busy life and your vibrational state will start lowering again. But, there are definitely things that you can do to maintain that vibrational state even beyond the sound session. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I wanted to speak to that impact of different holistic practices being very real and very meaningful. But I was where maybe some members of your audience were or are 10 years ago, where a sound bath, really, a yoga session, really, I mean, isn't it more just a trend, a buzz? No, there's really something almost scientific about it, that as you grow to study, experience and learn, you come to understand. And it's rather wonderful because it's very accessible. Sound baths are everywhere now. I'm sure they are in the UK as much as they are here in Spain.
Yeah, yeah, and no, thank you for delving into that a little bit more. And I think you've made perfect sense in how you've described it with the, being 70% water and the sound passes through water, and that's really easy to understand. So for anyone that was thinking, yeah, sound bath, what? Then now there's that scientific, that factual evidence to say, to prove why it's so important. And yeah, they are popping up quite a lot here. I live quite close to a place called Cop, which has got quite a lot of pagan history surrounding it. And summer solstice, which we've just had, there's loads of people up there on the hill with the castle ruin at the top. A castle, it's more of a turret really, but it's a place where people go, and it's a very sacred place, one of those places that has a lot of energy around, and with just the birds, and you can see so far, so you've got the visual as well as that sound element there with nature, and it's powerful. It really is. Yeah, I think we just need to, the more we can share this sort of information, the better, for sure.
Definitely, 100%. And I think that stress isn't going away. We lead accelerated lives. I think the more awareness we have of different practices that allow us to invite slowness into our lives and invite a sense of peace and steadiness, I think that these are tools that everyone needs. And obviously you can pick the tools in your toolbox. Maybe for some people it's this type of thing, for others it's another. But for me personally, especially doing the yoga certification, which you referred to earlier, I was able to discover lots of different yoga practices, including sound yoga. And that was the tool I picked for my toolbox, and then subsequently decided to share with others.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right when you talk about the metaphorical toolbox. We've all got one, and we've all got an array of things in there, and we can pick and choose what works for us. And that's what I say a lot about journaling, which you'll realize as well, because you've created a journal, that it's about finding the techniques that work for you, that whole ritual around the writing, what works for people, and that can be very, very different. And I'm conscious that we've kind of jumped a little bit, because I've got quite a few questions that I wanted to ask you, Kate. So if we could just sort of come back to some of the quick fire questions. and because they are quite a lot around, the reading and the nature and the writing, which are kind of my toolkit, my significant toolkit, my hierarchy of toolkit, should I say. So what was the last book that you read, Kate, and how did it influence your perspective on journaling or professional growth?
So the last book I read was The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a seminal work of action in the somatic healing field. And if you were to boil it down to a very simple sentence, this book talks about how trauma, difficult moments in your life, store themselves as energy in your muscles, in your body, in your fascia, right? That connective tissue that's sort of over all your muscles, under your skin. And his book I really like it because it's not just about diagnosis. It's not just about explaining how this all works. It also offers a toolkit for relieving some of that stored up tension in your muscle, musculature, or your fascia. Yeah, I really liked incorporating it into my practice because he has a whole chapter on how yoga is a way of releasing some of that stored up tension from past trauma, how role play and drama and theatre is another modality to, again, lift some of that stored up, pent up strain in your body, because you have this creative outlet where you can kind of assume another life, another personality on in the safe space of a stage, and how massage is, again, another modality. So of all the, let's say, solutions, and he has many more than those three, but yoga and massage were two that really sung to me. And, I, as a result of reading that book, took up an aromatherapy course where I was not just able to understand scent and the power of scent on the brain, on the the emotional brain, but also use that knowledge when performing massage, not just on others, but even myself, right? I'm big into that. I find it an act of self-compassion, of self-care. Obviously, it's different when someone else gives that sort of service, if you like, that kind of offering, to when you offer it to yourself. But I found that, this book really switched me on to some very accessible daily practices that you can bring into your life if you have, and I think most of us have to some extent, tension and from difficult episodes in our lives. And it's been really amazing to sort of connect things that you hear about on the everyday, like massage. Everyone knows massage, everyone knows yoga, but to actually know that these things are not just for exercise or your beach bod. These are things also for regulating your nervous system, calming and pacifying any tension that you might have had from years back. So a roundabout answer to your question, but that was
and I think it's not understood as well as it could be with the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's interesting you were talking then, because a long time ago, 20 odd years ago actually, I was a massage therapist, but I worked on cruise ships, and it was a very conveyor belt process, get the client in, get them out, try and sell them as much product as you could. And they really didn't take, I'm sure it's different now, but there wasn't really the training necessarily from that holistic point of view. And certainly we didn't go into details about the aromatherapy oils and how that affects us from a physiological point of view, an emotional point of view, how that within the body and what each of those scents can do to the body. It was just, okay, well, you give a massage, you've got your base oil, you've got an essential oil, you've got a choice of three, and most of us used to just use the one that we prefer the smell of, regardless as to maybe what the client was coming in for. Although at the time, most of the clients used to come in for, they just wanted some relaxation. They didn't, we didn't know anything further beyond that. So it's really interesting to hear. I've written the name of that book down. I think I ought to get that myself and just add a few more toolboxes.
No, it's a really good one. And it's not a new text, by the way. I mean, I think that Bessel van der Kolk wrote that in maybe the 80s or 90s. I mean, it really is a landmark piece of work in this area.
Yeah. And the more that we become aware of such texts, the more people can read and gain the benefits. And yeah, you mentioned about using the massage or the oils on yourself. And again, I think some of these modalities, they're sort of seen as a bit of a luxury, rather than I don't want to say necessity, but something that we can incorporate into our daily lives or regular into our lives, and just use that as self-care, self-compassion.
100%. A lot of people do stumble when, and I'm one of them, when they hear things like, you should love yourself more, you should care for yourself more. And it's often, I ask myself the question, what do you mean by that? Like, how do you love yourself more? How do you, do you mean be arrogant? Do you mean be selfish? And the answer is no, not necessarily. It's about maybe dedicating small pockets of time during your busy, busy day to just be with yourself. And it could be through an act of, meditation. It could be taking a yoga class. It could be just, you've got some aches and pains because you've been walking for weeks, massaging your feet, maybe as you're watching a Netflix episode. Like, these things, trivial as they may sound, are you consciously engaging with yourself in a way that's kind? So when people do say, now to me, like, what do you mean by love yourself a bit more? It's like, massage your feet whilst you're watching, a true crime documentary. Why not?
Yeah.
It registers in your brain as something that you've done for yourself. That, like you said, it might seem like a luxury to some who've got busy schedules, but for me, that makes it even more special that you've dedicated even 10 minutes to being with yourself and showing yourself that act of compassion.
Yeah, we can all find 10 minutes a day, can't we? Let's get serious. We can all find 10 minutes a day. And I think once we start to see the benefits of that, we're more inclined to carve out that time, and even more time to be able to look after ourselves and to sit with ourselves. And I think we become more receptive to, oh, that's happening inside my body, or that makes me feel this way. And you say about those aches and pains, a lot of us, we sit at a desk for the majority of the day, or maybe we're on our feet for a long time looking after other people. And we just maybe assume that the aches and pains are something to do with that, which they will be. But, to think about that being some sort of past trauma that's kind of stuck somewhere, is to really then get to know ourselves better and deeper and on a different level, and just think about what outcome will come from that. And it can only be positive.
I agree with you completely. And to give you a quick anecdote to also illuminate what you've just said, it's already beautifully illuminated, but just to add a little bit more light, I was basically suffering from sciatica, the sciatic nerve, which runs from your lower back to down your legs on one side. And it was, a real constant, almost like a dull ache in the background, but constant, chronic, you might say. And, I, again, just assumed it's because I walk a lot, I'm very active, I'm getting a little older, that's why. And when I started doing the research, reading, Bessel's book and also others around, what are the other implications of certain chronic things that are going on in your body, not just because you walk a lot, but maybe, like you say, things from deeper past. I then discovered that sciatica is known as something that happens when you're almost scared to take a step forward in your life and begin a new chapter, because it's sort of your legs holding you back, or it's like an ache in the very parts of your body that power you forward physically in life. And it's funny because I meditated on that. I was thinking about it, and I realized, yes, I'm making this transition from a more corporate life to a more diverse and holistic life. And it is terrifying in some senses, especially from the financial perspective. And, it kind of, when I spoke about this with my therapist and worked through this sort of, and sort of brought it to the surface, like admitting in plain sight, I'm really scared about this transition. It was then that, actually coincidentally or otherwise, that this pain started to lessen. And actually these days, it's just almost not there. So I do believe that there is a connection between your mental state, deeply buried tension, and things that pop up on your body, on the surface. There's definitely a connection to be made there, but oftentimes we don't make it because it requires a little bit of holistic knowledge that, like we said at the beginning, you don't get taught early on. You either learn it later, through communities, picking up books, being interested in these things, or, some other way, coincidentally, rather than as
Mm.
part of the curriculum.
Yeah, for sure. Sciatica is something that a lot of people suffer from, and they would assume that it's something to do with the activities they would do. Fascinating. So, Kate, where was the last forest bathing walk that you led? And what moments stood out for you, or what did you find particularly inspiring?
So the last one took place on the mountain of Montjuic, which is literally a half an hour walk from the center of town. It's a mountain right slap bang in the middle of Barcelona, which is a real plus because within minutes you can be at a really high altitude and see the whole bay and be among some incredibly beautiful trees. The walk was approximately 1 kilometer, and we walk extremely slowly. So to give you an idea, each step is a breath in and a breath out. So there's no real number of seconds because everyone breathes at different rates, but it was slow. And what stood out to me during that particular walk is we had a sharing circle at the very end of it. We sat down, we had a little tea, and we had a chat. We did some journaling. And then for those who wanted to share something about their forest walk, they did. And one described doing one of the activities, which was a tree meditation, and asking the tree of his choice a question. And he actually had, at that point in his relationship, a kind of crisis where I think the two of them were debating whether they would end things or somehow plod on. And so he asked the tree, basically, what should I do? Which way should I turn? And he said he was staring at the tree and the bark and the leaves, and nothing seemed to be talking to him or giving him any kind of answer. So he just said, okay, well, I gave it my best shot, but it's not working out for me. He turned away from the tree and he described seeing on the ground as he turned a branch with 2 pine cones on it. And he was just intrigued to pick up this branch with the 2 pine cones. And one of the pine cones was fully opened and another one was fully closed. And the thought that popped into his mind when he picked up this branch was, we can be together. One of us can be so open and mature and grounded, and the other one's so closed and, young and, struggling with life a little bit, like kind of closed off to the world. But we are connected to the same branch and we can make this work. And as he described this whole process and this discovery, he was like, the tears were streaming down his face, and others in the group as well were visibly moved. It just made me realize that sometimes when we choose slowness and we go to a place where we can really be quiet and we can really just ask the important questions and observe life around us, we get answers somehow and in some way that we weren't expecting, but we get answers. So that was an incredibly memorable forest bath and concluding sharing circle. Really beautiful.
Yeah. Wow, what a lovely story. And, a great example of sort of metaphorically seeing something in nature and how that then relates to, and you take meaning from that and how that related to the relationship. And it'd be lovely to see how they're getting on. I was on that journey as you were describing, walking up the mountain and then having that expansive bird's eye view of everything that's going on beneath you, but also the contrast, the city of Barcelona and beach and the sea, but also the mountains and the woodland as well. It's a very rich landscape to be able to draw meaning from in a lot of different ways.
100%. And here's a science bit for you as well. When you go up to a pine forest or pine woodland that Montjuic is, where there's a high density of coniferous trees, right, evergreen trees, in those photosynthesizing pine needles and of other trees as well, the leaves, these plants are emitting particles into the air all the time, because I mean, they're taking in things and they're emitting things. And some of the emissions are these negative ions, others are phytoncides. And basically, all these different particles are being absorbed by whomsoever is walking through this woodland. And phytoncides particularly have had scientific benefits on multiple systems in the body, the respiratory system, the parasympathetic system. I'm probably pronouncing that the wrong way. I have to remember.
Yeah, I get confused with those two as well. It's fine.
But you know, again, it's no coincidence that when you take a nice slow walk through a forest and allow yourself to bathe in all of these particles, that you go back to the city life or your house or wherever feeling different, feeling refreshed, feeling like you've got a bit clearer ahead on your shoulders. And yeah, there are multiple benefits of receiving these ions and these particles, including better sleep, lowered insulin. So you basically go in with stress, with a potentially depleted immune system, shallow breathing, and you leave with clearer airways, lower blood sugar levels. You notice that you can sleep more comfortably at night, and the effects last about 7 days. So it's not just a sort of one-stop shop, and you know, you have to keep on recharging every couple of days. Like these ions and these particles have really lasting effects on the body. So yeah, the sort of idea of a forest bath, when people have heard it at first, often I get asked, will I have to bring a swimming costume? Will there be some water? And I said, no, it's just a walk in a forest or a woodland, but you're being bathed in these particles, which really have these magnificent positive effects on your body and particularly your respiratory system. So yeah, that was again, you know, these different practices do seem a little bit inaccessible or confusing when you first hear about them, but once people try them, I don't think they ever look back, because they really notice a difference between the before and after experiencing them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what a great reason to go on a forest walk once a week. You offer them on a Friday evening, I think, you once a week, just to go in and top up those levels and be refreshed and be energized and take what you need from that. And I remember reading something about these particles myself a while ago, and I think, are they supposed to be stronger as well after it's rained? Yeah.
The concentration of phytoncides is on Earth, it's most concentrated in waterfall environments. So if there's a waterfall where there's water and, you know, trees, the distribution is far more concentrated and potent. And then in a sort of typical pine forest is where you'll find your, you know, next level down in terms of intensity of phytoncides. And then, you know, if you're also like at a beach as well, like with the water kind of gushing towards you and then pulling back, like that is also another place where you can find these kind of negative ions in that case, not phytoncides, because they're related to trees and trees only. But yes, where there's running water, there's an amplified effect.
Yeah, hence the popularity of wild swimming, I suppose. And it's interesting you should talk about waterfalls, because a couple of weeks ago I went on a hiking weekend with some friends at the Brecon Beacons in Wales, and we did a circular path of all the waterfalls, but you could go behind a couple of these waterfalls. And it was so energizing, because wasn't a great day either. It was generally a wet day, wet from the sky, not just the waterfalls. But yeah, it was so energizing. I didn't really want to leave, although all my friends sort of walk around the back and then walk again. And I think I could stay here for much longer. And I slept really well that night too.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not just you know, the negative ions pouring forth from these places. It's also the sounds. It's, you know, everything is positively impacting the system at the same time. So
yeah, your senses are ignited.
totally.
Yeah. So that leads me on to ask Kate about the somatic practitioner, and you know, you specialising in forest bathing at the aromatherapy side as well. How do you encompass the somatic practices with the written word? So, you know, we talked about that slow walking, which I relate to that, and I've done the odd mindfulness walk myself, where people have commented about how different that kind of experience is when you really slow down. But how do you combine those things?
I think the simplest way I combine those different things is by having a journaling circle at the end of the forest walk. Oftentimes when people go on the walk and they realize how slow it is, suddenly they're confronted with all of their thoughts, and their thoughts like bubble to the surface. And as they're observing different plants, different leaves, different flowers, their breathing, the feeling of their bare feet on the ground, right, touching pebbles and, sometimes a bit of dry mud or whatever, they are really ready to process some of that in some way that feels right for them. And I found picking up a pen and a book and journaling about the experience as you're walking along when you finished really helps people get in touch with themselves. A lot of the time we're running around in our busy lives and, we're absolutely flooded with distractions. When you do a forest walk, it's kind of the opposite. You're kind of emptying out everything, and things that might have been bubbling under the surface unawares suddenly boil to the top. And, I think it is important to release. So that's how I bring in the written word to the practice. I allow some incubation time for these thoughts to come to the surface, but instead of, some people are not ready to share them out loud, and I totally respect that. And so the more sort of introverted practice of writing it down in your journal allows that sense of letting go, but at the same time feeling accompanied by your thoughts, right? Like you're not alone, So yeah, that's, I guess, the way of bringing it together that I've worked on so far.
Yeah, it's having that safe space for people to, as you say, be able to write privately. And then, of course, they have a choice if they want to share it. And it's cathartic to write your thoughts down and organise it if they want to, or make more meaning out of it by reflecting on that. But I think being able to voice that as well sometimes is, again, a different experience and maybe more powerful experience if they're willing. And in nature's holding that space for them, as well as you being a facilitator, but then they've got nature as that kind of co-creator, or allowing that space for them to pull their thoughts out at whatever they need at the time.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like nature is the co-creator and inspires the thoughts and offers the safe space in which to create and meditate and think, and in some cases share. But yeah, I guess my role in all of this is to present an opportunity, right? A container, a parameter where people can be. And, I offer them guided activities within the context of the forest and the forest walk. We don't just walk, right? I mentioned a tree meditation earlier. We also have other activities like a mandala, create a group mandala. And that also is another release for some who don't want to use their voice, but they want to use their powers of observation and their powers of curation to express what's on their mind. And it's very a curious and intuitive practice. In the beginning, when I learned about it, before I practiced it with groups, I again had my doubts. I'm a big skeptic actually, but actually when I've gone out with groups and I've noticed that sometimes the groups flow well together, even though no one's talking, you could sort of feel when the energy is kind of like collaborative and positive and people just seem upbeat. And then you can conversely see when people maybe a bit more guarded or, they seem a bit heavier. That really ends up being reflected in what the mandala looks like. It's quite astonishing.
Wow. Yeah.
So mandalas are another modality, another activity that we do on the forest walk for people to express, to share, to let go, again, within the safe space of the group.
Yeah. And so do you have different activities on different weeks, or does it generally follow a similar structure? I mean, I realise that the walk element's going to be there, and the sharing circle at the end with the journaling's going to be there.
There are a few key components like you're describing, but what does change is the location and then also the group's needs. So before a forest bath takes place, I will send a short questionnaire. And one of the questions will be, like, how have you been feeling recently? And I obviously encourage people to share as much as they wish, because once I understand the snapshot, the emotional snapshot of the group before we go on the walk, I will then curate which trees we go to, which plants we focus on, how many, for example, activities there are on the walk. So the emphasis changes depending on where we are, obviously, because some places have more types of plants than others are a bit more sparse, but then also how are the group feeling? It really is a curated experience for the folks who are going out on that particular day.
Yeah, sounds fabulous. And so if I could bring in there the Barcelona Journaling Festival, it was the first one last year in November, and you were you were involved again this year. So it'd be lovely to book on a walk on a forest path if you're running one during that weekend.
I certainly plan to contribute to the off program because the festival has the main 2-day event, but this year there'll probably be even more off events, like sort of free gatherings before and after the main festival where folks can meet one another, where, if they're not coming to the main festival, they still feel included. And they also get to choose a range of different types of activities. So journaling in the forest, for example, or journaling on the beach at sunrise, plus a yoga session, right? There's going to be a lot of different opportunities. So everyone try something that suits them.
Yeah, it sounds fabulous. And it was a great community of people. How did you get involved in that?
Wow, it's a story of algorithms.
Interesting.
So I use LinkedIn like many other folks, and I created this journal and decided to talk about it on LinkedIn because I saw it as a journal for professionals who are, perhaps more right-brained individuals looking to get a bit of left-brain structure in their life. It's my situation, and it's a situation I think for many. So I created this journal, talked about it on LinkedIn. First time I'd done anything like that, got quite a good response. But that aside, I suddenly started seeing in my feed content about journaling, other people around the world who were either first degree connections or second or third. And, they had some kind of interest in journaling as well. So that was the algorithm literally pairing me up with other folks who were talking on LinkedIn about journaling in some shape or form. And one of those people was Marusha, one of the co-founders, because she, a few weeks after I'd posted about my journal, posted about this event called the Barcelona Journaling Festival. And through the keywords, I assume, that piece of content got served up into my LinkedIn feed. Now, Marusha was a third degree connection. I had never met her. I didn't really know anyone who knew her. We were both living in Barcelona, but, Barcelona is, it's got a fair few number of
place.
Yeah. And I saw that piece of content, saw the event, and just my mind said, you have got to contact this person and find out more. Because journaling for me has been something I've done alone. Yes, I made this journal with the ambition to bring it to communities, but I journal alone. I don't really go to journaling circles. I don't have a journaling coach yet. And when I saw that there was this entire event called the Journaling Festival, I felt like, wow, these people are my tribe and I never knew it. Or, let's at least find out a bit more. And so Marusha and I had a coffee. I DM'd her. She wrote back. She was very excited to hear about the journal. Obviously, I wanted to hear more about her idea, her vision, her event. And then from that moment onwards, it was like, right, we should work together in some shape or form. And so I ended up coming to the festival that following November, supporting with the bookstore that they had on site. And then we all talked with Oliver, a fellow co-founder, and the three of us decided it would be good to collaborate again for the next one.
Brilliant. Yeah. So will your journal be available at the next one?
Yeah, my journal will be available there. So
yeah. So tell us a little bit about the journal. What was your inspiration behind the journal? Hold it up for those that are viewing. Let's have a little look at the inside.
Yes. So it's called the Honest Journal. It didn't have that name in the beginning of its life, but it's had so many different iterations. But now it's a journal that tells a story of why I created it, and save you having to read it on screen. I am a creative person who struggles with structure. Having a journal in the very beginning was just me grabbing a book, any book, and just jotting down my to-do list for the day, which was useful. It was helpful, but it wasn't doing it for me. I wasn't feeling very satisfied by this. I abandoned so many books, started again. And then I was turned on to a productivity journal by Brendan Burchard, who's a US-based coach, and he created his own journal. So I have a stack of those. And I used to enjoy the everyday questions and the everyday prompts that his journal had, which obviously my blank books had no prompts. They were just blank books. So I started to get into prompts through this particular productivity journal, but there were so many prompts. I used to literally feel physical anxiety filling them all out each day, thinking, God, I don't know the answer to this one. I don't know what to write for this one. And in the end, what had begun as quite a productive activity started to feel like a burden. I tried a few other productivity journals because I knew there was something in it that I liked, but I couldn't quite get on with the structure of these different books. And then it just occurred to me, why don't I just make my own? Why don't I just, take the best of each of these that I've tried and cobble it together and see if that works for me? And it did. And I cut out a lot of the prompts that didn't make sense. I added the ones that really helped me over a long period of time change my thought patterns, the way that I operate in the world. And what sort of brought me to this idea of honesty is that I gave the first version of the journal I made to 20 beta testers. And I said, look, take this journal, use it for 3 months because it's a 90-day journal, and tell me what you liked about it and tell me what you hated about it. So it was my way of taking the product to market.
Yeah.
And the feedback was really interesting. I got a lot of things that I didn't expect from the different testers. But one piece of one sort of feedback I got was really interesting, was that someone said, it's like forcing me to be honest with myself every single day. It's not like a to-do list or an Excel spreadsheet where I tick things off. It's like asking me, what am I feeling today? Like, how focused or foggy am I? Why might that be? And that really stuck with me because one of my values as a person is to be honest, even if it's to my detriment, perhaps, or, when it's uncomfortable. And I thought, you know what? This book is a private space where you can offline, far from the prying eyes of cookies, and you can just be who you are, and you can shape who you are in privacy. And so that is the story of the Honest Journal.
Yeah. And, it sounds as though you've really taken your time with it and thought about it. As you say, you were using other journals before. And I think that, that experience is the same experience with a lot of people. You try something and it might work for a period of time, or there's elements that just don't work, but you're unaware of other activities or structure or processes that would work better for you. And I think a lot of journaling, the experience of journaling is a constant exploration in yourself, but also finding what works, because, what works for you now might not work in 10 years' time. When your little ones have grown up, career-wise, you're going to be in a different place, you're going to have different needs. So it is being able to take these resources and use these exercises interchangeably, but also listening, as you did, listening to yourself, listening to, your mind, body and your soul, and, seeing where that might lead, and choosing something that does work for you at the time. So, congratulations in going through the process, and also having your 20 people to give you feedback as well, which I think is important, because, they can come up with things that you may never have thought about on your own. Yeah.
And they certainly did. I really have to credit those 20 testers for making this journal worthy of an audience, because I think before it was, it was a work in progress. And you're right, it was a long iterative process. But I'm glad I took that time. I'm always assuaged by deadlines in my corporate job, or, immediate needs with my little ones. It's sometimes nice to have projects with no deadline and with no urgency. And this is definitely one of those slow labors of love.
Yeah, but just being able to switch in between the slowness and the busyness, that little safe haven of having something there just for you is so needed by so many of us, which you mentioned, in your career, your corporate role. And you've worked very extensively in marketing, and I was interested actually because you do a lot of data analysis as far as marketing is concerned, and we've got AI now. And I wondered on what your thoughts, Kate, were about. Do you see AI as enhancing or supporting maybe journaling practice, and if so, how?
Well, I have a personal example to share, Anna, which is I have started dropping voice notes into ChatGPT in terms of just giving the AI a stream of my consciousness and then sort of capping it with the question, what insights can you give me from this wad of text that's now translated from my voice into ChatGPT? And it's been illuminating. Like it's obviously like I'm almost getting a mirror reflection back, because AI works in I mean, it has two levels, right? Like it's only as smart as you, really. I mean, on a basic subscription or a freemium plan. But it's also drawing upon the collective wisdom of of the world, if you like, of everyone else who's inputting data into it. But yeah, I mean, there are some obvious privacy concerns with what I'm doing, but I don't know. I'm a vigilante experimenter, so I'm willing to take the risk. But I definitely see AI being a co-pilot or an accomplice in the journaling process. I don't know how that works with a physical journal. I still see this as being an utterly, private offline thing. This journal does have digital content to support your journey, but it's not interactive in that sense. It's like you get content to give you tips on how to do things, but it's quite one way, whereas AI is incredibly two-way. It's just so I guess I'm still in the experimentation phase. Don't know how it's going to play out in terms of journaling, but I think we're taking one small step into an incredibly vast new world. And I think a lot of us are feeling like that at the moment with AI.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it is about experimentation and using it for things that would work. I mean, from a work point of view, I uploaded a ton of my solo podcast episodes and asked it to, give me a tone of voice and, all that documentation that would go with that, which I find has been quite useful now when I'm trying to do marketing materials and I put together the message that I want to come out with. But then I also use the document as a way of cross-referencing that with, is that still my tone of voice? Because I think sometimes we can go off track with things, so it's making sure that it's all consistent. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you saying about you uploading your voice notes and asking for insight with that, because I can see how that can be a very what's the word I'm looking for? Just insightful outcome that you would not necessarily have. And if it gets to know your thought process and how you maybe talk to yourself, for people that may be a little bit negative in some aspects, it can help be a bit of a pick-me-up partner in that process.
Totally. I think for anyone looking for greater self-awareness, and I'm definitely someone like that, it's been an invaluable tool. Definitely. I mean, journaling in some ways offers you that mirror of yourself. I guess AI offers you that mirror plus some, because it has speed, has collective knowledge. And obviously you're, as you say, quite rightly, you're almost feeding it and training it on you.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting opportunity, I think, that we all have to use AI in our path of self-discovery and self-improvement.
Yeah, for sure. Watch this space, we could say, couldn't we? So what advice, Kate, would you give to someone who's starting their journaling journey? Is there a specific exercise maybe or a way in that you would recommend?
Yes. I would. I think that journaling cards are a great way in because prompts are so powerful. Oftentimes it's just a question, a sentence, a few words strung together. But oftentimes those questions are curveball questions that really make you dig deep and answer honestly. They can even make you defensive sometimes, these types of prompts. I remember reading some of them from the earlier journals that I'd brought from Burchard, etc., and thinking, I don't know how to answer that. I don't almost want to even think about that.
Yeah.
I think that's where you start to really get to know yourself, the good, the not so good. We're complex and multifaceted humans, right? And journaling is such an opportunity to get to know all parts of you and to accept all parts of you and to nourish and in some cases tone down potentially some parts of you. So for me, the prompts are the way in. And you don't need to get a big journal full of pages or, just get yourself some prompts. You can even ask ChatGPT to write you some prompts and just start getting a little bit uncomfortable as you write, and stuff starts to happen. If you've kept up a daily practice for 5 minutes for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you have a way of recording what you're writing, so definitely have a book and a piece of paper, a pen and a piece of paper. You look back and you think, goodness gracious me, what an evolution. I look at some of my journals from 2020 when the pandemic hit and when I really first started journaling, and I think, whoa, I have made significant progress as a person, 100%. And at the time, you don't realize it. And maybe a couple of weeks in, you don't realize it. But as you stretch your practice over months and years, you notice a huge difference in terms of your self-awareness, in terms of your clarity, in terms of your confidence, in terms of your goal setting. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
So get started with a couple of prompts on ChatGPT and you'll be golden.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right. As you have this practice and this practice continues, you can look back and you think, wow, I have made significant progress. And that might be just from an emotional way that you were and how that's kind of got more positive over the time period. Or it could be a situation that you thought, I'm never going to be able to get out of this situation. But then, a year later, you absolutely are, and you're living your best life better than you could have even imagined that 12 months ago. And that journal is the evidence that you've experienced that. And I love prompts as well. Prompts have definitely got me into journaling on a deeper level, because I think you're absolutely right. They do throw a bit of a curveball, and providing you, I'm going to say, gift yourself the honesty of answering that, then that is when the insight really starts to flow, and you think, I can work with this. This is giving me something that I would not have if it wasn't for those prompts, and it wasn't for responding to those prompts in the best way I can, and being honest. Yeah. So Kate, what's next for you in 2025, and how can people connect with you, learn more about the forest baths, learn more about just, connecting with you in general?
Yeah, so connecting with me in general, I would say Instagram is a great place. If you go to Instagram, the Do Nada Club is where I'm gathering all the information around my somatic practice, the forest baths, the aromatherapy. That's all available at .nada.club, and it's written as it sounds. And yeah, I think that's probably the best place to keep abreast of all the different things I'm doing.
Brilliant. So I'll include that in the show notes as well. And when is the journal going to be available?
So the journal will be available at the Barcelona Journaling Festival on the 8th and 9th of November at the Centre of Arts and Design in Poblenou, which is one of the neighbourhoods in Barcelona, the one right next to the beach. So hopefully see you there, Anna.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely be there. So yeah, hopefully some people listening and watching will be inspired to go there as well. Kate, it's been absolutely fabulous to chat to you this morning. I really appreciate how much you've gone into detail about the forest bathing, the emotional aspects, the physical aspects, the science behind it all, and also sharing your story about coming to create this beautiful journal and the prompts and things that have been included. So yeah, it's been wonderful to have you on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.